right, so welcome to the Town of Richmond's Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, August the 5th, 2026. It looks like we do have a quorum of our members here, Mark Fausel, Chelsea Brooks, and myself, so we can open the meeting. Looks like we have a guest and we have MMC TV as well recording. And we have Keith, of course. So welcome everybody. We'll get started here. Our agenda is going to look pretty familiar to everybody since it's the same agenda that we've been working off, with our main item being to continue the stormwater discussion and hopefully make some forward progress on it. Anybody want to make any comments about the agenda or any comments about things that are not on the agenda? Trevor, you're our one guest, so you can make a comment if you want.
Just a clarification, my last name is pronounced like the dinosaur bones.
Fossil.
Fossil, yeah.
Okay.
Not fossil.
Okay, great. That's good to know, and that's how the transcription records it, as fossil. F-O-S-S-I-L.
You could probably leave it like that. I really should change my name and just, it just causes confusion and mispronunciation when people read.
Well, thank you for correcting it.
You should see what they do with my name, Mark.
Osborne?
A lot of that, yes.
I'm sorry.
Where's the S? Where's the S in Osborne?
There is none. It's actually a place name in Southampton in England. It's a village there, the village of Osborne.
Very nice. All right, so I am not hearing any other changes to the agenda or public comment, so we will proceed with the published agenda. Moving on, our agenda suggests that we review the minutes of our July 15th meeting. Are there any corrections or additions or changes that people want to make to those minutes?
Look good.
Okay. Not hearing any other comments or corrections, we will accept those minutes into the record as written. Okay, so moving on to number 4, we're continuing our stormwater discussion about the regulations. And at our last meeting, we focused a lot on the question of the matrix, which is only one little piece of these regulations, which is who has to have a professionally designed plan. There were some other pieces in that document. Keith submitted the Brooks document to the DRB to get their comments, and you saw the comments that were submitted back in the package. So this week I wanted to try to take a slightly different tack, which is to discuss the framework of the whole document. How is this document going to be presented? And I want, partially based on the comments of the DRB, to make it as short a learning curve for the people who are going to administrate this, the zoning administrator, the DRB, Keith, planning department, applicants, make it as much like the previous one as possible. I know that Chelsea had wanted to have a whole new squeaky clean document because the rest of the zoning regulations are a hodgepodge, but I think that is more confusing to people, more difficult to understand. So I would like to promote the concept of the documents that are in the package this week as being easier for people to use and to understand, and to be the minimum amount of regulations rather than the maximum amount of regulations. So I think to make progress, we need to talk about the whole picture. And so that's what I would like to do today, and to look at the documents that that I have put together. We could look at the memo, maybe to start with, because it explains what I've done to put these documents together. Mostly I looked at the minutes from our last meeting, the comments that were made, the strategies that were proposed, and also the comments from the DRB to a certain extent, and the original proposals that I made. So, talking about the framework, how are these regulations going to be accomplished? And my point number one in the memo is that we're going to use section 5 of the zoning regulations, and then the subdivision regulations, which should really be part of the zoning regulations, but they aren't. They're a separate document. So I'm hoping that we can all agree that this is how we're going to utilize these. They're going to be through the permitting structure that already exists. So the regulations are a little jumbled, but I think if we can just add a few of these regulations in, that we will have a better chance of achieving our goal. And, you know, the reason that I'm thinking about the DRB's comments, no matter what you think about them, is that we're not going to be able to get the select board to agree to anything that the DRB is opposed to. So it's just not going to happen. They're going to tell us to go back and work on it some more. So anyway, just a comment. So hopefully we can agree with point number one, that those are the regulations that we're going to use, and we're just going to add what we want into those regulations. Secondly, the matrix to me seems really daunting for applicants, and the DRB comments seem to think it was difficult. So using that matrix as a basis, I just took the cutoff points. Like if you're working in the matrix and if you get 3 points or more, then you have to have the professionally designed plan. So I just made that item, the 3-point item, the cutoff for a regulation. You either are or aren't, in sync with that regulation. So that there's just a smaller number of regulations and nothing that the applicant has to do except say that he or she either does or doesn't meet that regulation. So it's not as nuanced, it's more straightforward. It may not capture everything, but I think it's too ambitious to try to capture everything. I think we should try to make it simple. All right, so that's the second point there. Going to the third point down. So looking at Mark's comments about his 4-step procedure, this is also designed to, essentially simplify the matrix question by having these different levels. So under some number feet of disturbance, whether you want it to be 600 or 400 or 1,000, there are no regulations. So this, I think, is politically useful because we can say that below a certain size, you don't have to worry about this. It's, below a small size. Now, that's not going to capture every single situation, but in general, I think it's going to allow people to do things even smaller than they might have wanted to and not be burdened with thinking about these regulations. That's a suggestion for step number 1. This is based on Mark's formulation. Then there's a level of disturbance where the applicant can design their own plan up to a certain level of disturbance. The regulations do apply, but the applicant can design their own plan. And likewise, up to a certain size of impervious surface created with the no slope criteria, the applicant can design a plan for stormwater management. And then I put in 2 drainage issues that I tried to take out of the matrix, to lift out of the matrix, to simplify them. So that's the second level of complexity for applicants, is you can design your own plan between the 600 and this other, whatever number you want. Then you get to a certain size, and a lot of this is relative to size, which is what the state does. It's all about the amount of disturbance. Then you have to have a state plan. So 3A and 3B are the areas where you need a professionally designed plan, but it doesn't necessarily have to go to the DRB if you don't need to go to the DRB for anything else. So that was Mark's third level or step. And then the fourth level is for those areas which are numerous: conditional use, subdivision, PUD. If a site plan is already required by the DRB, you have to have a professionally designed plan, and then you also have DRB review. So that was an attempt to put that, because I thought that was a useful way of looking at it, to make these different steps and to, allow for less complications or more complications. If the exact numbers, if we can decide on the framework and the policy, then the numbers we can alter if people want to do that. All right, so 2 and 3, point 2 and point 3 dealt with the matrix question. So if we continue along on this document that I'm hoping reflects some principles that we can agree on, Section 6.17 is an educational and guidance tool. So people do not have to go to Section 6.17 to understand what it is that they have to do. Either, they only have to use it to help them learn about and put into their thinking these stormwater and erosion prevention policies. But it's a guidance tool. There are no specific standards in there, but, as we know, the particularities are so diverse of different sites. You can't require any one thing overall for every project, because every project is different. So we are hoping that this allows people to think about it, and applicants will have to have read it, but the regulating part is not in 6.17, it's in the permitting process. So, and then number 5 is just that I think this framework allows the DRB and the zoning administrator and planning department to understand better how the regulations fit into their process and to help get buy-in. And you can scroll down a little bit further there, Keith. So, all of the DRB members said this is complex, and, so there's definitely going to need to be some training and some discussion. I mean, one of the comments was, why don't you just stick with the large-scale projects and let the state do it? Well, the whole point of this exercise is that because of the increasing problem with stormwater in particular, we need to think about the small-scale projects. So that will be a whole discussion that we will have to have with the people who are going to administrate these items. So anyway, that is my thinking about looking at a framework for this. So would people like to discuss this further? I know, Chelsea, you wanted to put it all in section 6.17, but I think that is much more difficult for people to understand how they, as regulators, actually fit into this process. So, but I'll entertain comments.
What I guess I don't know what you mean by for people to understand how they fit into it.
Well, the regulators have to know how they fit into it. The zoning administrator, what does he have to do? What does he have to, is there something different about the permit? There is something different about the permit. There are going to be these new requirements in the permit that relate to erosion prevention and stormwater. So when the zoning administrator is looking through the zoning permit section, section 5, there are a list of things that are needed to get a zoning permit for the plan and for the site plan if it's needed. There's a list of things that are needed. So what we've done is we have just added the fact that you have to have the erosion prevention and you have to have the stormwater. You have to have considered the stormwater question. And some of these things are already done in internal policies. Keith will confirm that he and Dante already ask people who are looking for a zoning permit to provide this information. It's like the permit navigator question. Well, it wasn't actually required in the permitting document, but it is an internal policy. One of the things that we hit upon in the town plan for reforming the regulatory process is to take internal policies and put them into the regulations so people know about them, so that you don't come into the zoning office and all of a sudden they're talking about erosion and stormwater. But it's on the permit so that you can see it. The administrators look at all the requirements that you are to provide in order to get a zoning permit, and erosion and stormwater show up there. So that's basically what I mean when you're doing a site plan. If you're doing a site plan, you need to put on the site plan what you're going to do. It shows that you have looked at section 6.17 or the handbooks and that you have picked out some of those items. There's still going to be some decision making on the part of the administrators because it is complex and each site is different, and you're never going to be able to make requirements, I don't believe, that fit every single situation. So there will still be some decision making, but you are required to show a plan and you are required to look at section 6.17 and think about what you want to do. And there are going to be different things that are going to be okay.
I do want to clarify real quick that we do have promulgated that the permit navigator is to be submitted with each permit. So that's already in the RZR.
Currently.
Currently, yes.
Well,
that's a requirement.
Except it's different language. It talks about, it doesn't refer to the permit navigator, but it refers to
The ANR.
ANR's, information from ANR about what permits are required. So, yeah, anyway. So we just changed that language to permit navigator, and that's good that it's already in there. The requirements for erosion and sedimentation and stormwater are not mentioned. So, this is one of Keith's main concerns, is to get the authority, the authorization for those things into the document, into our document. So, we can look at the documents go through them to see how little has actually changed, which I think is helpful for the administrators, but what has changed. So if we want to look at, for instance, section 5, this is the permitting section. This is where they will go to, people will go to. And applicants will go, with the help of staff, will go to see what is required for a zoning permit. If they're new, if they've already done this, they will see that much of the language is the same. So what's in black is all the stuff that's already there, is written in there. And we can go down to what I am recommending, and we seem to be talking about being recommended, in addition to what is there. Okay, so all the stuff in the beginning of that permitting section is the same. We are now talking about what you need to have in a zoning permit application. So this material is already there, it's already there. People are already used to it. I didn't see anything wrong with it. Keep going. I did suggest that we do not allow the DRB to waive certain things like the site plan, but anyway, okay. All right, so the application requirements. Every zoning permit application needs to have a site plan. It does not have to have a site plan review. This is, one of those things, Chelsea, that I would agree is very muddled and confusing about the current zoning ordinance, but it is based on the statutory language about site plan review, which is a thing. I don't know, I think maybe you were okay with that anyway. I thought it was unfortunate that the site plan and a site plan review are not, have to be two completely different things. Anyway, everybody has to have a drawing, a sketch, whatever. And these are all the things that are already required in it. Location, permits, any other permits, if it's in another district. So those things are all still required. State permits, if you need a state permit, they're required, and we did change it to Vermont Permit Navigator form. I don't know, maybe we didn't change it. Maybe that was already in there like that, Keith, I don't know.
I'm looking at it right now and I don't see it. It just says, contact the regional permit specialist.
Okay. All right, so we're going with the Vermont Permit Navigator.
So this line here could probably go. Whoops. I am so sorry. This last line here could probably go.
What, starting?
The applicant should contact right here.
Oh, the regional permit specialist? Yeah. Okay. Well, that would be fine if that goes. And it does mention the construction and operational permits. If they are needed them, the applicant is responsible for getting those. It doesn't say you have to have them to get your local permit, because we can't really say that, but the applicant is responsible for it. Building energy standards was already in there. That was a new thing that was added a few years ago, or a number of years ago, that you had to have your RBs or your CBs. That was put into the legislation about zoning. So that, we left all that in there, and then added the stormwater and erosion control features. So this is something that we're now telling the zoning administrator that they have to look for, and our permit forms will have to reflect that this is on there. And you can have a description or a portrayal of the erosion prevention and sediment control guidelines. And this reflects that principle that I went over in the first document. Once again, the numbers may not be the numbers we want, but I sort of took them off the matrix. You have to have a plan if you're over the minimum, where you don't need to have a plan. And if you're in the middle section, the middle levels or steps, it has to be professionally designed. If you're in there, if you are, and if we go down for the stormwater, I don't know why this is not showing up in red in this document. Anyway, because these are things that we added. This also says that for stormwater, the plan has to be professionally designed if the new impervious is such and such, or if new runoff is proposed to drain onto a neighboring property, or if new runoff is proposed to drain onto public or private infrastructure which might be inadequate. So those particular statements we could work on and massage them, as long as we're okay with using that 4-level format, where over a certain point, then you have to have a professionally designed plan. All right, then for permits requiring DRB review, that just is telling it's reminding the zoning administrator which kinds of applications are going to require DRB review.
More importantly, it's telling the applicant also what is.
And
that's the main focus, because most of these changes are going to be associated with permits only. Not a lot to the DRB, obviously, if you hit the triggers that you do. But most of this stuff is the everyday work that we do.
yeah. So this is like level 4.
Right. Yep.
These are all the things that require DRB review. And, in the subdivision, it's not called a site plan, but it's like a site plan. I kind of worried about that because it's called a plat in the subdivision. The subdivision plat is like the site plan review. So hopefully people aren't mixed up about that. Anyway, all right, so that's all. Those are all of the things that are required. All that we've added into that section, basically. The main thing that we've added is that you're required to show in your application a plan or a picture display how you're going to meet the erosion and stormwater. So to me, that's pretty straightforward for the applicant and for the administrator that this has been added to the list of things that you have to have for your zoning permit application. All right, any comments about that or questions? I mean, can anybody see any different way that it's going to be easy for people to understand what exactly it is that they're supposed to do? All right, so let's move on. We can go through the rest of this section 5, carry on. Most of this language is already in here.
It's current. Yep, it's current.
So process after the permit is issued, this is procedural, but that's okay. People are used to looking at this kind of thing.
Start recording.
Keep going, the permit, effective dates, misrepresentations, that was added by this board a while back. We did add in this section the language about critical permit conditions, which we have been advised we need to have in our zoning regulations, and we use the critical permit condition language in place of the master development plan, which was problematic. nobody knew what it guaranteed, and it guarantees nothing because you can change it at any time. So the critical permit conditions is a little more of a legal barrier. So what this is going to do, this is going to give the DRB something else to do, which is to decide if something is a critical permit condition. Is this something, a condition that is to be fulfilled that gives a basis for approval of this, that the zoning permit or the DRB review would not be approved without this. So it's going to make it harder to amend it. It's not going to be impossible to amend, but it's going to make it harder to amend.
Go through the test.
Yeah, and we're going to have the lawyer come and talk to us and the DRB about that at some point in time. We did that work when we talked about the master development plan. Certificate of occupancy, the only thing that we added here was scrolling on down. Let's see, go back
Did
up.
you change any?
Yes. Wait, I think C, there's a C. C, right there.
Okay, sorry.
So we added, I don't know why
5,
these
3,
aren't showing up in red, but proposed long-term, it's probably getting one program into another program. Anyway. So what we have added is proposed long-term stormwater management features are in place and erosion control measures have been discontinued following site stabilization. So that's,
there it is.
all right. So this is where
Sorry,
they're
folks.
showing up in red.
Dun, 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 dun.
And hopefully that is the copy in red, which is in the meeting materials, right, Keith?
Yeah, it is. All I had to do, I had to hit the edit.
Oh, okay.
That's all that was. So this is where we were before.
Okay. So certificate of occupancy.
Oh, that's far more valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah, just ensure that you hit
I
edit.
just want to
Yeah, the
start
edit
over
button.
and see that with the highlights.
Okay. Well, they're
It's not
there
in our
in
document either. How do I do that?
the documents.
You'd have to download it, Mark, most likely.
Okay, so the one I've opened up in Word on my server isn't editable like that.
It should be. You should be able to edit.
Oh Jesus, it wants me to sign in.
Technological challenges. Yeah, this
This is so much better to read now. It was impossible to follow along with what was
Right.
and what's new.
right.
So I
Yeah,
have this.
totally. Well, that's why I did it in red and it just didn't get through. So are you seeing it now
I
with the
can
red?
see it now on my copy. Yeah, I don't
Okay.
know how I logged in. It did it for me, which terrifies me. But
Huh. So anyway, what we added was a condition of a CO. So who's ever giving out the COs, which is going to be the zoning administrator, who should be checking to make sure that all the conditions, if the DRB has put conditions on an approval, should be checking to see that those conditions are fulfilled, and also that whatever was proposed for stormwater management has been done, and also the erosion control measures like the silt fence and stuff have been removed because they sometimes aren't. So that was added there. All right, so continuing on, and we can go back and look at the beginning and if you want in a minute, but okay, so subdivision review. So this was a place where we also and this you will see in the subdivision, the Richmond subdivision regulations, when we look at that, its subdivision review is mentioned in section 5, but it says you have to go to the subdivision regulations section. So we talked about, and Keith was a big promoter of having a minor and a major subdivision category. And the difference is that a minor subdivision, which is the division of one lot into 2 or 3 lots on existing streets, does not require the full 3-step review by DRB procedure. Sketch, which is not totally required, but recommended, sketch, preliminary, and final, which takes up, I guess, a lot of the time. I don't know, Keith, you can talk about this. It seemed like it kind of fit in with our trying to give people whose projects were small not as much to do. Do you want to talk about it, Keith?
Yeah, I mean, just from the sense of, it's typically a small landowner that's going to do a small or a minor subdivision. And to run them through the whole process seems a bit overburdened. This is a decision the commission's going to have to make. Are you okay with a minor being 2 lots? It can only be 2 lots. It can't be less than 2 lots. It's not a subdivision if it's less than 2 lots. So there's a 2-lot subdivision. Would that be good for a minor? Would a 3 or 2 or 3-lot subdivision be good for a minor? Which would you go directly to final? It doesn't mean that they get an approval that night. They could if everything is checked off. But if you have a more complicated one, obviously one that requires rural road standards and the like, you're going to want to go through a major subdivision, which would give you the option of going through sketch, preliminary, and final. Regardless of what the subdivision is, those rules still apply. I mean, you have to have a professionally designed plan, you have to have a survey, you have to have, well, it's probably going to be dropped down to a 10-year storm from a 25-year storm, but you got to account for that also. That's basically what I'm thinking in that regard. So obviously you could hit these little bubbles. It's Virginia and I going back and forth, just kind of our thinking. You can add to this also with everybody else's thinking if need be. So that's the long and the short of it.
And this is something that isn't other people's land development regulations,
It is.
other towns' land development regulations, so as not to overburden the DRB with the smaller projects. And another thing that we have suggested in this document is that as many as possible of the conditions that the DRB might put on an application for a subdivision should be reflected in the approval of the preliminary plan, which is the plan that, there's a hearing and everything with the preliminary plan. Any recommendations that the DR makes should go there instead of waiting until the final and then having a lot of conditions, which then will, if it's approved with a lot of conditions, then they will have to be checked at the certificate of occupancy, which is probably not the best way to do it. You should try to get all the conditions out of the way with the preliminary. So with the minor, it's expected that there won't be a lot of conditions placed on it. There may be some, but they're not going to be as many, right, Keith, presumably, as with a major, where there may be more conditions that are going to have to be discussed at the preliminary.
Right. The sausage is made at preliminary. Preliminary should be, everything should be discussed at preliminary and should be finalized and settled. And then when you go to final, everything that was settled at preliminary, there should be 0 changes going to final. And final should be perfunctory if everything is done right. So that's the way I've been trained, and that's the way I've always operated. Here it's a little different. This DRB doesn't have a problem putting conditions on final subdivision approvals, which is, but jaw dropping, why, you need trees, you need extra trees here. That should not be on a final subdivision decision. That should have been on a preliminary decision. Case in point would have been Browns Court, the most recent subdivision at Browns Court. They put as a condition of approval 15 trees, 6 feet high. Well, that should have been done at preliminary. That's my point. So,
And the, the point of having a sketch plan or a meeting with the zoning administrator, this is one of the things that is the job of the zoning administrator, is when the zoning application comes and it's going to be a minor, like with 2 lots, the zoning administrator is going to need to see if there are going to be a lot of conditions, if it's very problematic somehow. So he's going to have to work with the developer, but it will free up the DRB to just do the final. But the zoning administrator is going to have to be the one who's going to work on if there looks like there are going to be a lot of conditions. The history of these kinds of things is that the minors with the small number of new lots are not going to have a lot of conditions.
But they
Yeah,
will need a site plan. A professionally engineered site plan? Is that
yeah,
what you're thinking?
it would have to follow the rules of the subdivision regulations, which require, everything is pointed out. Actually, subdivision regulations are pretty easy to administer. They're not, from the point of view of getting a complete application. But
It has to be prepared professionally.
yeah,
Well,
typically, yeah.
currently, the way it's worded is that the DRB can waive any condition that they don't think is necessary. So we did hear earlier from David Sunshine, who said he thought they should all be professionally designed if they were coming to the DRB. They should all be professionally designed. So, if you want to keep it straightforward, you would say anything, which is what we're suggesting here. Anything that goes to the DRB has to have a professionally designed plan. And the DRB shouldn't really be able to waive it for good cause, is what it says. Now, talk
Right.
about a subjective interpretation. What does that
Right.
mean? For good cause. They don't want to do it. Is that a good cause? Or,
So we're doing away with administratively created lots completely. The
I'd
only
like
thing
to.
that a zoning administrator can approve is a boundary adjustment.
Correct.
or
And
That's what,
so then if you are just doing even a single lot subdivision, you're parsing it off and it's all very straightforward and there's lots of rooms and plenty of setback. They still have to get an engineered, designed site plan.
yes, an engineer design, yeah, for the plat, yes. You have to design the stormwater to, potentially a 10-year storm. Right now, it's a 25-year storm. So obviously, you're going to need a professional for that. Erosion and sedimentation control plan also. That
Yeah,
point.
one of the problems with section 2.6, which is the administratively approved subdivisions,
Yeah.
is for 25 acres or more. Why 25 acres? What if it's 20 acres? That's very arbitrary, kind of a very arbitrary
Yes.
situation. So the idea was to kind of compromise by making it less burdensome, by having less of the DRB procedure, but still
more
having
burdensome
it
because you
approved.
have to have it professionally engineered.
Yeah, you do
It's
regardless.
not less burdensome. This is more burdensome than what we had previously.
Well,
But less arbitrary.
Yes, I'll give you that. But, and I'm not crazy about it, whatever the DRB decides to waive as a condition of the zoning regs, but I wonder if, the reason why it's 25 acres is because chances are if you've got 25 acres and you're doing a subdivision, there's a really good chance you're not going to be messing with anybody else's life on a big lot like that.
yeah, I would say that's probably the impetus of it, Mark. I would agree.
Although one of the things that one of the DRB members mentioned was, we don't have anything that if you're going to take 10 acres of land and cut down all the trees, it's probably going to be an erosion problem. We don't have anything like that. So, maybe
Right.
we need to
That's a
know
good
if
thing
you
to
have 25 acres and you're going to cut down all the trees.
But a professional engineered site plan doesn't mean they're not going to be able to do that. That's a wholly different
No, but you're gonna have to
Termination.
have a professionally engineered site plan to deal with the erosion from cutting down the trees on 25 acres. Because otherwise you're gonna have a super erosion problem. Or maybe it's the slope of 15% and you're cutting down all the trees. Don't we want a
So where
professionally
does it
designed site
define?
plan?
Yeah, where does it define what the components of the site plan must include?
It's in the subregs.
Well, for a subdivision, it's under the plat, the subdivision plat requirements.
Where am I going to find that?
Well,
In the
we'll go over that,
current
yeah.
zoning regs.
It's in the subdivision regulations. If it's a subdivision, it will be in subdivision regulations. We've had to duplicate a lot of this stuff into both the subdivision regulations and the zoning regulations because they're split unnecessarily. They're not land
Yeah.
development.
I know.
So,
Only go I just searched the subdivision regs. The current one is 2009, which surprises me. We haven't changed anything in 17 years, but
no, it needs work.
but the only thing that references site plan is a complete application must include site plans.
Right, and then
Tell
they
me what
tick
a
off what,
site plan has to assess.
yeah, well, then you go down and read the section a little bit farther. It tells you all the design requirements that's needed.
So we're going to look at the subdivision regulations after we get through with this part here, which doesn't really deal with the subdivision regulations, except that they're mentioned in the zoning that you have to go to the subdivision regulations.
And what I'm saying is that in the subdivision regulations, when I search for site plan, I only get one reference and that it must exist and
Right.
be submitted, but it does not define what the site plan is.
But
So where
it's
would I
the
find what a
plat.
site plan is if we're going to make everybody do it because it's going to have value? I have to have some sort of understanding of what it actually is that we're getting the benefit of mandating a site plan. If you know, if there's no classification of a site plan, does the state have a
Well, there,
characteristics of what a site plan must constitute? Yeah, I mean, I could draw a map with a crayon and say, well, that's my site plan.
look at Article 3. You look at Article 3 of the subregs, it tells you exactly what you need on the site plan, which is basically
Article
replaced
3.
with the word plat.
It's called a plat in the subdivision regs, which we could explain is the same thing as the site plan.
That's good to know because I would not have known that myself.
Right. Well, it's, kind of ridiculous, but it's the way these regulations are not combined into a single land use development.
So a
regulation.
plat is a site plan.
Right.
Basically.
Exactly. And the subdivision regulations just say you have to have a plat, you need all these things, and you have to have a plan, and you need all these things. In the zoning regulation, for the other things that need DRB review, like conditional use, PUD, you have to have a site plan review and a plan. So they amount to the same thing.
I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. I mean, I'm looking at 5.4 that is up in the screen now. The two salient points are that I'd like the commission to chew on. Are you okay with major and minor and how that's set out? And also, to me, the big thing here is I want to get rid of the administratively created lots. I mean, that is.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I would like to get rid of the administratively created lots.
Section 2.6.
Right. Okay.
I really, the few that I've done, they're a challenge to say the least. And we can't provide waivers, we can't provide conditions. It has to follow every single point in the subdivision plans to the best of our abilities, or best of the applicant's abilities.
So having a professionally designed plat.
You would still need it. You would,
Everything will resolve all those issues.
yeah, everything that the DRB requires for a subdivision, we require for administrative subdivision at the permitting level. or
Yeah.
out of our office. Well, that's difficult. So we don't have the ability to make waivers. We're not allowed to do that. So it
Or
has to
make
be,
conditions
or make
either,
conditions, exactly. So
or have a public hearing
that's why I want to
about
get
your
rid of it.
neighbors.
That's a huge part of it too. That's a huge part of it. All it is a C card. You
Okay.
know?
Okay.
I don't like it.
Even with
That's-
25 acres, your neighbors are going to come and have a problem with it later, but there's been no public hearing.
Yeah, that's one of the salient issues with the administratively
Yeah,
created
All
lots.
right. All right. All right. I'm on board with
you
that.
can think about it anyway. Chelsea, yeah.
Hey, sorry, had to make my screen bigger in order to unmute. Um, I guess my only comment on this one is that I don't sort of without reviewing other towns' regs and how major and minor compare to each other, I don't particularly see a whole lot of value in having a difference, quite frankly, is where I'm currently at. Either way, you still need the professionally design plans. You essentially need all the same application materials. The only difference we're proposing is that with less lots, you don't have to do preliminary and final. But like if you have watched our DRB in any recent years, you know they frequently combine preliminary and final in the same hearing.
I wouldn't
So
say frequently, but yeah, I mean, they
I
have done it in the past, yes.
so I mean I guess like that ability is there. Um Blanket saying that any 2 to 3 lot subdivision wouldn't require or like wouldn't even consider preliminary and final just feels like sort of putting a one size fits all on, as we've discussed, things are different. And the example Keith just used on Brown's Court, if this was in place before that development had happened, it would have been a quote minor subdivision and one review and that's it, bing bang boom. And it took the DRB hearing from community members and whatnot to actually appropriately analyze and process that application. I guess it also
Yeah,
doesn't give the opportunity for feedback on like waiver requests because that like every single subdivision application before the DRB that night, and I think there was 3, there was waiver requests. And so if it's a minor subdivision and it's all meant to be heard in that one night, it doesn't give a whole lot of time to chew on these various waiver requests. So that's just kind of, like I said, that's my initial feedback there.
So
yeah, I think that,
are we saying that the minor is uh they require site plans, but they only have one DRB hearing?
Yeah, that's what
potentially. I'm sorry to step on you there, Chelsea.
I think that's what's currently like, that's how this is currently sort of pitched.
Yeah, I would say that would be a potential. It doesn't mean that that would be the rule. You know, if the DRB is not satisfied at for a minor subdivision, and all the boxes aren't checked, they would continue it. Or based on past precedents, they put 3,000 conditions on it.
So a minor would have no waivers.
No, I think it could still have waivers. It would still follow the same rules as the subdivision requirements are laid out right now. The only thing that it does is it eliminates the need, as Chelsea said correctly, that you don't need preliminary, or you could go right straight to final. But you still have to follow all the regulations and all that. And that's typically a lot easier with a 2-lot subdivision than it is with a 7-lot subdivision. That's really it. I'm not overly hung up on it, to be honest with you.
No, I'm not either.
That's fine. But what I am hung up on is I want to get rid of the administrative subdivisions. So
I hear
yeah.
you, and I respect that. I'm
Yeah.
I'm supporting you on that. I was a little antsy about it at first, but
Yeah.
I can see the reasoning behind it.
Mhm.
So
And
yeah,
if there's only one hearing, the final hearing, it could be continued.
Right.
You know, if there are some issues that need to be discussed, they could continue the hearing. So that would mean that it would be like a preliminary and a final. It would just be a continued final. So,
But I think there's a lot to say about having the two parts, just in the sense that you have more bites at the apple and the public has more of a chance, especially, the neighbors has more of a chance to discuss it. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I look at it from the point of view of if I was doing a subdivision, it's just a 2-lot subdivision. My goodness, why do I have to pay 2 application fees? I should be only just doing 1. So that I'm just trying to make it less burdensome on the applicant.
How much is a application fee?
It depends on how many lots. It's per lot. But I think the base fee, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's not
And
cheap.
it's per hearing?
Yeah, no, there's an application fee for, I think it's $100 for sketch. If you move on to preliminary, you get a credit, that $100 credit, and I can't remember. It's like $350 and then $50 per lot, something along those lines. But it's only at preliminary. If you have 5 separate meetings, it's not a fee for each meeting. It's just for the application. So right now
Okay.
yeah, it's preliminary and final. They're 2 separate applications and 2 separate application fees also.
Oh, so primary and final are 2
Separate.
separate $350 hits.
Right.
So you're
whatever it
just saying for the minor ones, it'd be possible even with multiple hearings potentially or multiple meetings, it would be possible to have just one $350 hit.
Correct.
mhm.
Correct. You got it.
Okay. All right. Got that.
So anyway, people could think about this, do we want to do this strategy? This is not directly related to our erosion and stormwater, but while we're doing this reformulating, do we want to do this? And do we want to have it, like a minor could be just 1 to 2, or 1 to 2 or 3, depending on, you can look at other towns or whatever if you want. Maybe I have some ones, but I don't have them handy, but I could put them together and show you what other towns do with it. I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't quite know the answer to this either, but
Well, the easy answer is to get rid of it and send all subdivisions to the DRB.
right.
That's it. I mean, that's the cleanest way to do it.
The way it is now, and if they're, it is a point that the applications each have to be done separately, and there's another $350. So that would be something that would be a benefit to applicants if we did it, since we may feel that we're making things harder for applicants by even having anything about stormwater and erosion control in the regulations. There is a sense in which we are making things difficult for people, but the problem is it's difficult to not have them, that's making it difficult.
It's detrimental to not have them. Right. So yes,
right.
it is more difficult, but it's also more difficult to have a site plan than to just go willy-nilly on subdivision. Yes, right. It is more difficult, but there's a reason why we have site plans.
Right.
There's a reason why we should have stormwater, and I'm sorry, right. The DRB doesn't like stormwater control or, the complications of it.
Right. Oh, we have to talk to them about that.
Yep. Well, I'd love to get their input on the details of it, but to simply not have stormwater management is, not an option.
Yeah. Well, they're used to just having it be at the state level for the really big projects. So that's just what they're used to. And, that's what we're trying to get away from. And that's what, people like Christy Witters have suggested, that we should target our regulations to the smaller projects, because you add them up and they become a big project. So.
Yep.
All right. So anyway, now in this permitting section 5, we get to site plan review. And we are reminded once again, I understand this is repetitive, but site plan review is required for conditional use, subdivision, PUD, and the permitted uses with the exception of the following. And in the tenure of Revi Venkataraman, we added a few things to also reduce the burden on the DRB, to make them be able to be more efficient. We added a couple of things a few years ago, like personal services. I think we added maybe
Multifamily 4-unit,
multifamily 4 units.
which I wasn't crazy about, but
Right, yeah. So anyway, we can alter that anytime we want. I mean, if we want to do that at this point, add more things, take things away, that's fine. These are just the permitted uses that are exempt from
Exempt.
the site plan and from DRB review. All right, and here's
There's
where
the
we've
strike through, right?
removed unless waived by the DRB for good cause, which seemed very problematic.
That's a pretty subjective statement.
Yeah. What they had in mind for good cause, I don't know. If someone says it costs too much, then is that a good cause? You know?
yeah,
That's a darn good cause, you darn
so
tooth.
there's some funny comments there,
Yeah.
Keith.
I mean, it's good for somebody.
Yeah.
It's a good cause for somebody. So,
I hate eggplants.
yeah, right. So anyway, I mean, that is another point that the planning commission will have to decide. Do we want that to just require a site plan? So anyway, I know that David Sunshine has seen many plans come through that he has not felt he could actually work with that easily, you know, but there was no requirement. If the rest of this DRB wanted it waived, then you could waive it. So anyway,
Yeah,
so
I
that's
don't like
another,
I don't like just leaving it to the DRB to waive what they want. You know, if we had strict limits,
right,
no exceptions, then that's fine. But just, random DRB mood
Right.
for that night is not a decision making
yeah.
axiom.
And it does open you up a little bit to favoritism, that kind of
Yes.
thing, you know. All right, so just put a star by that one as things that we have to decide
Hey,
yes or no.
Would you happen to know how much a site plan usually costs for like a single subdivision house with no like setback issues or anything like that? What's that run to engineer the water, the sewer, the construction?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I'd have to go back about 10 years.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm just wondering what kind of financial burden again, which is why I'm liking the minor if we
It's a,
figure out how to define it better,
yeah,
having
I,
it done in one hearing, but they still have to drop a site plan. How much is the extra hearing
right.
relative to, is it a $10,000-15,000 cost to do a site plan?
Right.
In which case, what the hell's another 350?
So it's typically engineers charged by the hour. And if you have an engineer in training, it's not as much. So they're usually $150 an hour, something like that, 125, somewhere around there. But that's been a while.
And it takes maybe 10, 20 hours to put together a site plan?
I don't know.
Okay.
At
All
least
right,
eight.
I'm grasping.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and it depends how difficult it is. And we have added another reason that you might need to have a site plan, which is these conditions that we're thinking of imposing about erosion and stormwater. If you have a difficult situation, it's going to take longer, to make the site plan. Or
Mhm.
if you have some other constraints on your parcel,
Yeah.
you know. So it really depends on the individual situation, I think. I think many people have professionally designed plans anyway, because they don't necessarily feel competent to design their own site plans. So anyway, maybe we can find that information out by asking our friendly engineer friends how much it costs.
Mark, so for perspective, the Browns Court thing was recently publicly stated that it was $44,000.
Really?
Yeah, I'd like to see that bill.
What's 350 on top of that? But anyways, okay, good to know. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and I mean, part of it, that particular case, the DRB required they required it to be engineered for the 25-year storm at the first hearing. At the second hearing, the engineer said, I wasn't at that hearing, I want to ask for a waiver. And the DRB said, no, we've already decided that you have to do this anyway. So then the engineer had to go around, go away and make up the new plan. So I'm not sure how much of that is if he had just done it the first time instead of saying he didn't want it, even though the DRB had already required it. I mean, that might have cost money too. So I don't know. There are always these wrinkles to the story that.
Well, it's difficult when engineers try to play zoning administrator too. So that's always a problem and a battle that we deal with basically on a daily basis. So that's what happened in that case too.
All right, so we can try to find that out. So that's this section, the subdivision review section, which is very short because the whole subdivision regs is going to be talked about in a little bit.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What's the difference between a variance and a waiver?
Well, the variance is a 5-step process you have to go through. You have to satisfy certain requirements. And a waiver is probably subjective, to be honest with you, Chelsea. But it has to have good reason behind it.
So the reason I'm bringing this up is because in the context of the stormwater stuff that we're working on, if it's in the zoning regs and there are rules, must do, shall do, all these things, there is no way to get around that without going to the DRB to request a variance. And it is very difficult per statute to get a variance. Like it can't be because it's costing me too much or all these reasons. It can't be
absolutely
self-inflicted. Like there's all sorts of things. So a variance is very difficult to secure. So one can presume that zoning regulations can't be subverted, at least not easily. However, folks go to the DRB and it's like waiver this, waiver that. That confuses me because if you can just like go to the DRB and get a waiver, does that supersede the fact that those same rules exist in our zoning? Like, how can the DRB willy-nilly waive something if it also lives in zoning wherein you can't get around it without a variance? Does this make sense in my line of thinking?
Well, I know that the DRB is very, very reluctant to ever give waivers for that very reason. So I have heard David Sunshine, who is no longer with the DRB, say that on numerous occasions, that it's very hard to get a waiver, and he's imprinted this on the new people on the DRB, that it's very hard to get a waiver because these are the rules and we don't waive them. But theoretically,
Have that defined somewhere? Like, is there a definite classification of different things you can get a waiver on?
Yes, it's pointed out in conditional use review, I believe. And there's some parameters that they do have some guardrails on them, but there are things that they can waive, definitely.
Where would I find that?
It'd be in the RZR. I'd have to dig it out myself, the exact language.
and it might be in the, probably in the section 800 of the subdivision regs. It might be somewhere in the zoning regulations in section 8. Section 8.4, appeals and variances.
If you put waiver, type in waiver in the.
Hearings of variance. The DRB may grant variances only if the following facts are found, that that it's not your fault, basically, and there's physical circumstances, there's no way that the property can be developed in strict conformity, that unnecessary hardship has not been created by the applicant. So that's the variance thing. Now let's see if there's waivers in here. somewhere.
There's also stuff on loading docks and
Yeah, parking and loading, yeah.
parking spaces.
They do utilize those waivers, actually, quite often. They did that with uh, good Lord, Brown's Court, parking lot. They waived the stormwater requirements for that.
Oh, the pickleball courts?
Yes, yep, they waived the stormwater requirements for that.
Yeah.
Which I thought was I thought it
I
was a little
guess
odd.
I guess therein lies my question, right? Like
Yeah.
if things are being worked on and if the goal is like uh conformity and clarity and consistency, then people with enough money will simply just like go to the DRB knowing they can get around stuff. Like the town, like pickleball courts being waived from stormwater requirements and subdivision, and in regs. And what the heck was I gonna say? And then like I've seen other spots where it's like we don't really know what this means, so that's good enough type situation as far as like stormwater goes. What does it even mean to manage your stormwater? Good enough. So definitely some things to be aware of.
I see most of the waivers associated with the parking regs. As I put this in. And it does say in the subdivision regs, in the section 704, there is an actual waivers. No public road or public infrastructure may be waived. Anything along those. But
What section is that?
that's section 704 of the subregs.
704. Waivers. Yep.
So overall, they don't grant a lot of waivers. They do. I've seen it on the parking. They did it there. They did it for BYCC. They waived the waivers for parking lots, stormwater, which just blew me away. And the staff notes definitely reflected the need for them. Yeah.
It also says in section 704, in granting waivers, the DRB shall require any conditions that will secure substantially the objectives of the requirements so waived. Well, I don't know if they do that or not, but no such waiver will be granted if it would have the effect of nullifying the intent and purpose of the act, which we're replacing with the actual.
I was going to say that's your favorite word.
Yeah, not the act. Any provisions of the zoning regulation, these subdivision regulations, or any other town bylaws. So, theoretically,
Anything's on the table.
Yeah.
you shouldn't be able to get a waiver if you're going to nullify the effect of any regulation. But anyway, the whole waiver question is a problem.
Well, you do have to have some ability to grant waivers. There are extenuating circumstances, and you're not going to be able to capture all of that. So I think, it is a good tool, but it's only a good tool if it's wielded by a DRB that is well educated and knows the rules. Honestly.
Yeah.
And understands that it can't, nullify any other regulation.
I know, but how do you nullify is a strong word. You're not nullifying it, but you are impeding it with any waiver. So where do you actually go to the point of a nullification? That's some loosey-goosey language I hadn't really thought about probably in a long, long time.
Yeah, well, this is something that is going to come up in terms of these erosion and stormwater regulations for sure. People are going to want to waive them.
Yeah.
Yep, the ones that go to
really
the
on the table. The regs read that pretty much everything is on the table.
Well, it's kind of the beauty if we promulgate whatever we promulgate for stormwater at the permitting phase that doesn't require site plan review or any DRB reviews, we can't grant waivers. So, Dante can't grant a waiver. So I
Right.
mean, that's one thing that I'd really like to get, LID and first flush and whatever you guys want to do. And then that's like, we can't grant the waiver. You have to show this. And then over time, it becomes systemic, which is what you want in a positive sense, not in a negative sense.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is education. Good Lord.
Yeah, that's where we're at with this. It's new as a regulation.
I feel like I'm going to school tonight.
Yeah. All right. So,
I haven't had to think about these guys and this stuff in a while. It seems like, to this minutia and interconnectedness.
right.
Ah,
So these, what are these called? This section is the
Okay.
factors that the DRB is supposed to consider. Application requirements, keep going down. Wait, don't go past the name of this section. What is the name of this section? Conditions of approval for the site plan review. So now this is only for site plans that are not applicant developed. These are for professionally designed site plans because they're for the ones for the DRB review. If we require that they all be professionally designed, these are things that they have to consider. And, this is another one of those sections where some of them are like recommendations and some of them are like standards. It's kind of, but it does talk about all the different things that the DRB is supposed to be thinking about. And we are just adding to that list that they are supposed to be thinking about erosion and stormwater. If you continue down now a little bit, there's about thinking about pedestrians and thinking about landscaping and thinking about screening and lighting and signs. And they're also supposed to be thinking about stormwater management and erosion control. So the DRB needs to evaluate compliance with the guidance in section 6.17. And there's no specific thing that they have to require because all sites are different. They just have to look at section 6.17 and see, are they complying with these things? And these are things that they should be thinking about. Now, I know that I understand the DRB doesn't want to think about these things. They just want it to be this or that you can do this, you can't do that. They want it to be very specific. But there's no way to make it exactly specific for all situations. So this is their job, is to consider these things and to consider whether it meets the requirements of abiding by section 6.17. Chelsea.
muted.
Oh, Chelsea, you're muted.
Sorry. So this sort of like runs along the same line of this like discretion versus like actual things people shall do. And right now, the DRB already like creating more regs that are similar in what we have that they already struggle / fail to manage seems like we're just shooting ourselves in the foot and setting up for like stuff to still be dysfunctional. Right now, the subdivision regs say you have to design for a 25-year storm. You have to plan for existing water as well as water from surfaces created. Like it's pretty like specific and it's all drawn out. But then they like nitpick it with like, well, what does manage mean? Like, what does this mean? I don't know. Like, and so it then gets down to the point where because nothing is like laid out, cut and dry, when they are themselves as the board questioning what does manage mean, then just whatever anybody says, well, that means I'm putting a couple of 5-gallon buckets under my rain spout. Like it means that anybody can just say anything is the management. And whether it's good enough or not, nobody knows. And oh well, because we don't have any clear definitions on what manage means. So stamp, stamp approved. So this is sort of like, I don't know. I feel like this, I'm just a broken record here saying the same thing of like discretion is a problem. But
Also the better part of valor, I believe.
Somebody else said
Also
that.
a problem, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I see where you're coming from, Chelsea. But I mean, we're not gonna be able to solve everything, that's for sure.
I'm not saying we are,
Yeah, I know.
but
I know.
I'm not saying we're going to solve everything or plan or design to every single specific circumstance.
Yeah.
But like the way I look at it, I guess here's the way to is if like you look at 10 projects, they're all going to be different. But
Yep.
but an engineer like because I can have my opinions. I know a lot about this stuff, but like let's just say somebody that's actually has a professional certification by their name says to us like, okay, those 10 projects can be so different. However, every single one of them should have these three things, right? I'm not saying we have to like have every single circumstance defined, but if we don't have some shalls, then the effect is that we'll have none, right? And like potentially all that discretion means that like nothing is promulgated in such a way that like you had to have this, you don't, therefore you're busted. Like if it's all like, well, you just told me I had to do things from the guidelines and I did some of them, and even though those suck and aren't working, like I still tried. And so if all our zoning regs say is like you got to try, we're just left with nothing to, I don't know.
Well, so Chelsea, let me read you the post-construction stormwater performance standards from your document. Post-construction stormwater management shall use low-impact development and site planning measures where practicable. You got that, may or may not. Then the next one says, stormwater runoff shall be slowed, spread, infiltrated, stored, reused, treated, filtered, or safely conveyed in a manner appropriate to the site. I mean, that's kind of allowing some discretion, I would say. Post-construction stormwater management may include treatment or management of existing impervious surfaces on the same lot or project site where the applicant demonstrates that the existing impervious surface is currently untreated or inadequately managed. I mean, so even where I'm assuming that you and Trevor tried to make some very specific things as requirements with shalls, there's still this ability to do it or not. It shall be managed where practicable. You know what I mean? You could say, well, it's like for good cause, we're going to waive this. It's just very difficult to require these absolutely. Trevor, you have your hand up.
Can you hear me? I don't know.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So that document, I would say, is not anywhere close to being anything that I actually would have wanted, or would be close to a even rough draft of what I would say should even have been shared with the DRB. That was just like the second revision, like the first revision of the document that I just sort of put a whole bunch of things in together to just for you as a planning commission to consider and see what you thought about it. So like none of that was worded in a way like, oh, this is what I want or what Chelsea wanted. I wrote the thing entirely by myself. For the most, like Chelsea had very little to do with that. So I wouldn't use any of the language in that as like an example of like what was deficient and what we came up with or I came up with. I just made that as an example of what could be done, things to think about. What do you want to handle? How do you want to do this? I wouldn't really even use, I don't know, like I feel like that this misses the point of the rules should be clear and like say what people need to do and not just refer to guidelines necessarily. Thanks.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be almost impossible to get any buy-in for making shall statements about stormwater management that the DRB is going to feel like they can require of developers. I don't know, Keith, what do you think?
The wording has to be clear. And to Trevor's point, we knew that those are rough. Those were rough drafts and everything. The purpose of me sending that to them was to get comment because they had not given any comments on the previous ones that Virginia and I promulgated to begin with. So they looked at both of those. But I don't know if I'm answering your question, Virginia, at all, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm not
Um,
sure what Trevor was referring to. What shells and did he draft?
In that document, in Trevor's document 6.17.10, post-construction stormwater performance standards.
Ah,
New impervious surface and altered drainage shall be managed to prevent increased erosion, flooding, sedimentation, concentrated runoff, drainage impacts, damage to neighboring properties, damage to public roads or infrastructure, and adverse impacts. So, I mean, Trevor, how would you have written that as a requirement, as an actual shall that would cover all situations in which it might occur?
So Trevor's going to talk right now, but before he does, I just want to jump in here and say that the DRB is literally asking us for this. I find it interesting that there's this perspective that they're not going to do it. They're not going to like it if you have shalls and things they have to do. They literally said it. I can pull the meetings. When discussing stormwater specifically, which I'm not even talking about other things the DRB has to look at and deal with. I'm not talking about parking. I'm not talking about anything. I'm talking about recently when they talked about stormwater, they were saying what does manage even mean? We really need to talk to the planning commission because we want these regs to be cut and dry. They are asking for less discretion. That is my perception, even in some of this feedback from them. If you filter out the feedback that is, whoa, this is a lot and it's complicated, you can see there's also this things should be clear. And to me, clear means less discretion. So sorry to cut off Trevor, but go ahead.
That's okay. I also missed 20 minutes of this conversation because I had to go pick a kid up from work. But I mean, I don't really write things on the fly, so I'd have to actually write it out. But there's ways that you would write out what the post management would be, and it'd be easiest to specify what is the target that you want to control, which might be 1 inch of rain that you would be able to hold for some period of time, and then have it slowly drain out, and you just base that off of square footage, and then you create containment for that on site, and then that's the simplest way to handle, I'd say post stormwater management. There's ways to write this very simply. I created what I did mostly because of the feedback from Mark and Chelsea. That wanted something with more complex and nuance where you could eliminate the need for more work with an engineer. And I personally don't want people to hire engineers unless they really have to. So this is not what I would have even done myself. I was just trying to make something that was roughly close to what people wanted on this end. But there's easy ways to make prescribed practices that you could do for stormwater management, where you just put the square footage in of what you're creating, and then you have a formula that's already done. You can say if it's in a range, you're oh, I've 1,000 square feet. You look at the chart and it says you need to create this much gallons of containment, and you can provide pre-made diagrams of in-ground infiltration products. You can also make below shed structures if you make gravel underneath the shed. If you dig out 6 inches underneath the shed and fill it with clean gravel, you can make stormwater containment under your shed foundation that just holds the water and drains. There's lots of ways, and there's other places, not in Vermont, that do this and which is more complicated than anything we have, and you'd be able to simplify it. But if there's ways to make this where you don't need an engineer on the low end of 2,000 square foot impervious, which I don't want people to have to get engineers. I'd like to make it easy where you can be like, oh, this is what I need. I just need to make this thing in the ground. It's already, there's diagrams that show what you do. You just dig a hole, put the fabric in, put the rock in, put the pipe in. It's not really that complicated. I don't know. That's the kind of stuff that I would like, is that it's simple. There's structures that already exist. There's like diagrams of how to make a rain garden pretty easily on site. Like it's not that hard. I'd also like, small projects shouldn't have to do these things. It becomes burdensome for small stuff. But I don't know. It's just, I'd have to like think about it and see like what like I would actually do on like based on what people want now. Because I mostly just wrote stuff based on what people said at the meeting is what they wanted. So anyway, probably going on too long.
Yeah, I just like want to clarify that probably, oh, what would I say? We do 120 permits a year. And of those 120 permits, 15 of them are DRB reviewed. The rest we do in-house. So I just want to make sure that, there is a dichotomy here with what we're going to do. Trevor is 100% correct. It is not difficult to do low impact development. It's not. You have a suite of things. But my concern is you have a layperson not understanding this. And of those 120 permits that we do a year, 100 of them are done by lay people. So that's kind of my point there. So you got to understand that a lot of this is not directed towards the DRB, it's directed towards our everyday permitting processes.
So Keith, how do you feel about putting in the zoning regulations diagrams and things like that and showing you how to do things so that you don't need to get an engineer?
Well, that's that you direct them to the low impact handbook. You direct them to items that are online. We'll have things printed out for them.
But then what's the regulation? What is the reason that they have to do this?
Because you have promulgated that at the permitting phase, you need to account for first flush through LID. None of this one inch you got to just design something to. Trevor and I can do that, but the person who's never done it before, they'll be clueless. So again, I'm as you know, I say this every meeting. I'm a KISS principle person. You got to keep it simple. That's really all it is here.
So what is your recommendation for the regulation to be?
In the permitting section, all I'm looking for is the ability to require erosion and sedimentation control plans and low impact development.
Well, but if you say, okay,
that's just at the permitting phase.
Just low impact development, how, are you and Dante going to be able to, if somebody says, okay, I want to put this rain garden in that I found a picture of, you're going to be okay with that? I mean, it's not specific enough.
Yes.
Is it too specific? Is it not specific enough?
No, I think that would work. I mean, it is, and that leads to, how much training does the zoning administrator need to have? Absolutely. The zoning administrator needs to understand these principles, these best management practices. I'm not going to be around much longer. So, we got somebody there right now who definitely can pick up on this, no problem. But it's so yeah, that's really the long and short of it.
So if we say in the regulations of the zoning permit, as we have suggested, that you display or explain your strategy for meeting the goals of section 6.17, is that specific enough? Or is it?
I think so. For what I'm trying to accomplish here.
Right. Well, I mean, presumably what you're trying to accomplish is to have not the negative effects of stormwater running onto other people's property.
Yeah,
So it does mean that there's a certain amount of leeway that you can have.
Absolutely.
If you just say you have to, not have runoff running onto other people's property. So, and you're going to have to look at the plans and see if you think that works. And then at the CO, you're going to have to see if it works. Well, you might not be able to see if it works because it might not rain.
Right. Right. But you could surmise it. I mean, you certainly can surmise it. There's no under this. There. We totally understand that we're going to have to take these folks by the hand. We know that. We do that now with erosion and sedimentation.
Mm-hmm.
And again, 90% of the erosion sedimentation that we ask for is silt fence.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And that's working, you think? I mean, that's
Yeah.
enough to be adequate for the moment.
yes.
Trevor,
I could actually share my actual opinions on these things at some point, but I have because I actually haven't done this yet. But I guess for like the construction phase, I think basically the what kind of way you have it is it's everything sort of has to follow the Low-Rose handbook. I think in general makes sense, and that but you don't have to show it on the plan if the project's small. This is my opinion. If it's medium-sized project, you might have to show where you're going to maybe put your silt fence on, like some basic features of the land, where you're going to control things, where the slopes aren't super steep. And then if it's steep, but I think also if it's steep, but also has a certain amount of disturbance that should trigger an engineer. I don't think just automatically 15% should trigger an engineer. Like if you're just going through like 4 square feet of steep area and the rest of it's flat, like I feel like there should be some sort of minimum through the steep area before you actually have to hire an engineer to do the whole thing. And then maybe I think roughly what you have now, the 20,000 square feet for an engineer as the just disturbance. That should you have an engineer? That's kind of what I personally think. For the post-construction stuff, there are like worksheets that other towns have in other states that are 1 or 2 pages long, where you just put in your square footage, and then they have like 3 practices from their best management practices manual, and it has a like you put in how big it's going to be, and it has a multiplier for like what kind of material it's going to be, what kind of rock it's going to be, like already in it. You just put the number in, and it already tells you off this other chart what number it needs to be. Tells you how big your rain garden, your in-ground infiltration basin that's going to drain out slowly has to be, and you just put the numbers in, and then you're done. It's fairly easy. You just have to show where it's going to be on the plan. They even have examples of what their simple site plan that doesn't have to have anything on it looks like, and then what their extra plus version of their simple site plan has that has to have a few extra features on it. Where's this going to be? How are you going to get the stormwater into it if you're running it off gutters? But it's like people have already done what we're trying to do, and so like I think we're making it somewhat more complicated than it needs to be, but we're also doing it kind of in a vague way. Which is why I want to be somewhat like you can lay this out pretty simply, so people. I don't want people to get engineers because it costs money and time, and engineers are fairly busy. And I don't really want people to have to get delayed to hire an engineer if they can like just be like, oh, 1,000 square feet, I have to create this much storage, that storage into this system, this many square feet. Here's the diagram, what it looks like. I can just hand it to the excavator. I just need to build a trench this big, put this rock in it, and it's not complicated. Like I've done similar things to this myself. It's not hard.
I'm telling you from an administrative point of view, it will be difficult. It's just, we get a lot of pushback. We get a lot of confusion. I don't understand. So I just let you know that.
Yeah.
For you and me, Trev, I mean, yes. Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
we understand that.
the states that I've looked at, like they're not none in Vermont. They're like, come to our office, we'll help you fill the sheet out. Like it says in like they have like we know we'll have to walk you through this. Come and we'll show you how to pull the GIS thing from the state's database to pull up these things that we want you to have on the map. Which I mean, maybe I don't know. It just I would like the zoning office to be as helpful as possible. But also, I realize it's extra time. It's like I also want to make it as easy as possible for the zoning office to help people, so they don't have to do a bunch of things. Things are pre-done. Like they just know, do these work for your site? Is this how big it is? Will this work? And then move on, do it.
I mean, the other option is if they don't like it and they feel it's too complicated, we have this table, we have this calculation of volume capacity that has to be achieved. And if they don't like it or they find it too confusing, they can always go right to an engineer and have a designed policy, So we're just trying to help them out by doing that. But if there's pushback and confusion and they don't like it, fine, get it formally designed by an engineer and problem solved. So I don't know, Keith. I'm sort of getting. I'm confused by your. I mean, well, part of it you're saying, okay, we can do this and give them guidance. And honestly, I think that's where you are. You give them that guidance, and you tell them this is what it is, and if they don't like it, they can always go to a professional. You know, pay the extra money and have it done. Maybe they can come up with something different. But if we take something conservative like whatever, the document Trevor's referring to, and if not incorporate it, at least have it as a an appendix, or I don't know if there's a state document that we can reference, but even internally we can just have a water containment table that, as Trevor described, and you just you do the math. As much roof area is being created, 1 inch storm, it's going to create, or first flush, I don't know the terms, is you're going to have to contain 500 gallons of water. Your stormwater system has to do that. Build it. Here's how you build it. This is how you build something for 500 gallons. You build up a 500-gallon, 1,000-gallon swale and fill it with rock. And you don't like that, well then take it to a professional. But it does give them, I think, I like the idea of trying to enable unengineered systems from people who know what they're doing and are comfortable with doing it. And I mean, honestly, when you go to build it, I mean, isn't that part of the COA? You're going to look at the swale filled with rock and say, okay, well, it's 10 by 20 and 10 feet deep. It should have this much capacity. You're good to go. I mean, am I oversimplifying in that, Keith?
I just think it's administratively difficult. No, I don't think you. I mean, I cut my teeth on Lake George. So,
Certainly not for you.
Yeah. So I mean, I just think there are pitfalls with this. When you start putting numbers on things, you need to have this square footage. You need to have this containment. People are going to glaze over. I'm just telling you. You got to make it as simple as possible. I understand that you can make a form that looks good, but I guarantee you, we're going to be spending so much time working on these people's projects. That's what I want to avoid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can have those forms, steal them from Essex or somebody, whatever, with those self-contained numbers. The documents Trevor's referring to, have them available as an appendix to this, and say, listen, if this is what you want to do, here's the document. Which is also a controlled document by the town that we, manage as an appendix. And maybe it'll get outdated and we'll have to update it someday, but those will be our regs for the time being, and try to make it as cut and dry as possible and simplified as possible. And if the person doing the development eyes start to glaze over and doesn't understand and can't manage that, well, he should have a contractor come in who understands it, or hire an engineer.
Trevor, do you have any, if you could at some point get some of those documents or one of those documents or something that we could look at, that would be great. Is that
Yep.
possible?
Yeah, I could send them to you. I was thinking this sort of before Chelsea goes, as like, so building codes are like, the International Residential Code is set up as like, this is a recipe book of things that you can pick that have already been predetermined to be acceptable building practices to work in certain situations. But if you want to do something that's not in the IRC, then you hire an engineer and you can be as creative as you want. which is I'm
Right.
trying to come up with like, because building code stuff is one of my hobbies and things that I'm sort of involved in also, and so that's how I look at this. Is like I'd like to give people the option so they don't have to go out and hire an engineer if it's complicated. If they want to manage it themselves and they can hand this to someone, I'm trying to make it as easy and not burdensome so they don't have to hire people if possible. But yeah, I can send stuff out to you.
Yeah, we don't have any building code enforcement either.
I know we don't. I'm just like I'm
Oh.
taking that as like a corollary to that, where like these are like things that you can do, already known to be good. They work. They're designed. You don't need an engineer to design this again for you. You can just build this. Just follow this recipe.
Yep. Okay. So if you want to pull something that's pretty simple and straightforward and short and isn't going to have people go wiggy with how much information is there, we could look
I
at
would
it.
probably go wiggy on just something simple, but I'd have to defer to my contractor or an engineer
Right. Yeah.
who's, if I really, wait, you're asking too much or I don't understand how this can be built. Well, then, you shouldn't be the one building it.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, Chelsea.
Sorry, yeah. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around some of this stuff from Keith's perspective and like administratively. So let just one sec. If, for example, we have in our regulations, you have to follow the low risk handbook, right, Keith? Like that's what I guess you guys are requiring right now. When you say that things that have like, and I might correct me if I've misinterpreted, things that are like you specifically have to do this versus like a blanket statement of follow the low risk handbook. Are you saying that like specific requirements, even if they happen to come from the low risk handbook, that those are more administratively difficult to administer than just telling someone like choose your own path?
No, I think my concern is when you start introducing sizing requirements to a plan, it's going to be very difficult to administer. To administer low impact development for first flush is not difficult. That's an easy concept. So for me, it's like when you start putting in the formulas, that's an issue.
Oh, okay.
That's where I'm coming from with that, Chelsea.
Yeah, I'm just trying to sort of like wrap my head around all this because like obviously if proposing changes, then I need to sort of understand where everybody's coming from.
Right.
Now, so like you don't think that it would be a problem to have, like I said, for example, the because I think Virginia brought this up at the last meeting, looking at the low risk handbook and saying like, are we really expecting people to look through this handbook and like MacGyver up a solution?
Right.
Because like I said, I am intimately acquainted with this handbook. I might have most of it memorized, but that's not the average person. So like in my mind, having actual shall requirements pulled from the handbook makes it easier. Then they're not having to go into the handbook. There's a lot of stuff in the handbook that's like in there, but it definitely like applies to larger development or certain specific situations. But the basic stuff, like you have to have one of these like erosion prevention practices. Pick your poison. You can choose silt fence, straw wattles, or, one other thing. Does that make it easier, clearer for applicants?
I think it would make it certainly would be a lot clearer than what's going on right now, which is just us required to give them the handbook and no guidance. So to have, I don't have a problem having for number one, we need definitions, but we also need to have illustrations of some of these practices in the zoning regulations. I have no problem with that whatsoever. But I mean, it's to me, it's kind of redundant to do that because you're already offering them the handbook, if that makes sense. I
Yeah.
don't think it's a bad idea. Redundancy, it can be educational for sure. But no, I mean, if they're going to use a straw wattle on a 15% slope, I would probably wouldn't approve the permit. You know, I mean, if you're going to put silt fence on a 20% slope, well, you're going to have wire. It's got to be wired, or be a double silt fence or something along those lines. So, I mean, they still have to get through the permitting process. You can't just have this willy-nilly plan or janky plan. It's got to make sense, and that's kind of where we come in to make sure that it makes sense, especially with the
So
lay people.
is that defined in that book you're referencing? Those types of slopes and types of fencing requirements.
Well, maybe not specifically in that one. If Chelsea, I imagine you sleep with that. I don't know. I hope you don't, Chelsea. I really do. Yeah, I mean, those are standard practices, wired silt fences and the
Because
like.
if we had a book like that we could reference, and maybe you can help them out with it, maybe you don't have to help them out with it, but say you have to present something that from that meets the standards defined in this book. You have
Yeah,
to install that. Whether you help them come up with that idea or not, here's the book. My son could probably read that book and be like, no problem, we can do all that. I would be probably lost.
but it's a
That's
pretty
just different people. But
yeah,
if I have to hire an engineer to do it, then that's what it'll take. But we have very clear defined limits from an external document rather than embedding everything in the regs. Because then if something gets updated, you got to update the whole regs
yeah.
and know what parts to pull out and what parts to change. Whereas, see this book, satisfy
Yeah.
these standards, and you're
It's
moving forward.
it's nuts the way it's written right now. It is absolutely it's basically useless. All we're required to do is give them the handbook.
Yeah.
You
So
gotta follow the hand. What the hell is that?
so I just had as I'm sitting here trying to, right, because I'm also like, while I'm having these thoughts, I'm trying to think of how to actually articulate them. Sorry. Um, so I guess my push for some specificity and not just saying follow the low risk handbook, and I'll try to explain, because the low risk handbook it's a slew of things. And so some of it is for sediment control, some of it is for slope stabilization, some of it is for temporary versus permanent stabilization. So the reason I'm saying that we need some specificity, and here I think this might help, is if we simply say follow the low risk handbook, and then somebody's if they're like, oh well, that means I'm going to put up silt fence.
Now, are you talking about the low risk handbook? You're talking about,
It's for
okay,
construction.
yeah, the construction book, not the low
Yeah.
impact development.
No.
But
I mean, I think my same
the
opinions
input,
carry to that.
the small scale development, low risk.
It's, well, the low impact, the low risk handbook could be used for really any size development.
Yeah.
It's quite literally what engineers use to manage projects that are 30,000, 40,000 square feet of disturbance, 2 acres, 7 acres.
Yeah, but
It's
it's written
all,
for people who aren't going to get a state permit because the state
no, the
permit.
low risk handbook is used by the state permitting program.
Yeah, well, it's fine, but it's if
So
they say, look at the low risk handbook, it lays it out pretty well what you have to do.
well, so here's what I'm trying to say is that if we simply say follow the low risk handbook, and they're like, oh, cool, I put up silt fence, I'm good to go. But then let's say a neighboring landowner, because we promulgate in our zoning that you have to follow the low risk handbook, people are thinking, oh, great, they're going to follow that whole dang handbook to a T. But then that doesn't happen. That's going to create problems for the town. So, like, at what point will the zoning office consider the low risk handbook met, right? And so then that's why I was saying
Right.
maybe we have certain things like you have to do XYZ, or like choose a practice from the low risk handbook, like with the help of the zoning office, to address A, sediment control, B, temporarily slope stabilization, C, permanent slope stabilization. So that's what I'm saying. Like, if we don't have something to say, like, here's when you have actually met it, you have passed the bar, then nobody knows when that bar has been met. Does that make, and so that's why I'm like, just because Keith mentioned that right now we focus on silt fence, and silt fence is one piece of the puzzle, but not the entire piece of the puzzle. And so like that's where I'm trying to like, we're gonna create problems saying follow the Voters Handbook, but then not actually require people to follow the entire handbook. And then like it's gonna just be like disputes and problems.
Right. Let me ask you this. That's a really good point. But then, so what if we just like, or I guess the question is to you, Keith. Would you, and then say Dante or any reasonably trained zoning administrator be able to look at the low risk handbook and then say, okay, for your situation, your approach is going to be sufficient?
Yes.
So
But I think, but what Chelsea, and I don't want to speak for you, Chelsea, but you're talking about, you want specifics laid out, and you shall follow these specifics and show some examples of that. Is that what you're saying, Chelsea?
I think it could be in a manner of specifics for practices, Keith, or just a manner of specifics for these are the things you shall treat or like deal with, right? Like maybe it's not like you shall use silt fence or straw wattles, but it could be you shall address sedimentation, sediment control. You shall address temporary slope stabilization. You shall address permanent slope stabilization. Like all these things of like, these are the things you need to address. Then it becomes the applicant's thing to like, be like, cool, I'm going to address those in these ways. And then it becomes the zoning office's task to analyze that to determine, yeah, cool. These are the things you shall address. Here's your things you're going to use to address those, and either yes or no, like that's good or not, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's what we had in the original document of 6.17.
Right.
Runoff from construction site shall be prevented. Silt fencing, erosion control, berm, filter socks, etc. may be used. Is that what you had in mind? I mean, that was in the original 6.17 that we changed to a should as a guideline, but we could put it back as a shall.
Well, yeah. So the original 6.17 was very much more along the lines of what I would have sort of, that's the direction I would have wanted to go. Shortly after that, all the shalls changed to shoulds, and then
to simplify it,
and yes, some of them can be shoulds. I'm not saying like everything has to be a shall, but like,
yeah, there can be a few that are, 4 or something that are shalls. You have to do this, you have to do that, And
here's the book to do it. Figure it out. Come back to the zoning officer, and they'll say yes, that's sufficient, or no, you're under. You can highball it, but you can't lowball it.
Well, that's the issue we have now. I mean, that's to my point.
But we officiate it and we say this is it, and ZA has the final say. And if you don't like it, go get it engineered. Or you won't get. You can always override with an engineer,
or the permit will be denied. You know, it's typically what we would do. We deny the permit.
Well, in 6.17, we can change a few of those back to shall, and in the permitting section, we say you shall abide by section 6.17.
I think you should say you shall consider. I'm just playing.
No. Can we trim down 6.17?
Well, 6.17 is pretty short. It's pretty short right now. I don't know if you've looked at it, but it's pretty short. And so under construction guidelines, which used to be construction requirements, runoff should be prevented. So you can say runoff shall be prevented with one of these things. if field conditions create turbid runoff that can't be contained within the construction site by the methods proposed, additional techniques shall be developed. Okay, that's fine. The area of land disturbance should be minimized to the greatest extent feasible. I don't think that's a shall. I think personally that that's a should. Because who are we to say how much land, to be disturbed?
Right.
Soil stabilization shall be provided within 14 days of final site grading. You could make that a shall if you wanted.
If you wanna make
I
that-
mean, these are the things that turned into guidelines, but the basic ones could be shalls. And then in your permitting section, you say, you shall abide by the requirements of section 6.17.
So that takes care of, because it's like 6 pages.
It's
617.
very short and it's got a lot of, educational
So
material.
then the only
as
thing
well.
we have to add to the length of that is almost like a standalone matrix still of what kicks you into mandating a formally engineered containment system.
Yeah, well, I think the matrix personally, and we'll have to talk about this some more, I guess, is too complicated. I think you should just have levels, like the state does. It just has levels. If you're over this amount of disturbed land, then you have to have a state permit.
Right.
So-
And you brought that up in document 1. Those are your 4 levels.
Right.
Yeah,
Just
those are the
numbers
levels.
right there.
Yeah, they're basic. It's not a matrix, though. It's just a
Oh.
requirement that you either are or you aren't fulfilling.
So does the commission feel good about that versus matrices? I wanted something that was leveled and standardized is what I want. I thought a matrix would be a funky way to do it. I can see the concerns of doing the math on all the different permutations, but we have this caveat, we have this in here, and then we basically also have the kickback that whatever you engineer, at least in the development stage, has to be prevent the job or you got to do more. Like you have a big storm and all this silt runs off. Well, you've got to upgrade we okayed that, but clearly it's not enough for this property. Neighbor complains. You've got to upgrade.
Yeah.
I mean, that
And
there is
and then again satisfy Keith's requirements and or have them engineer it.
I
we're not
mean-
even talking about compliance here. We don't have a compliance arm in my office, other than, the zoning administrator has the ability to make sure something is complied. But that's, Dante had over 60 miles on the road this past pay period. But
Just driving around checking
Just-
out places.
doing the stakeouts, which is not required, but it's an internal policy.
Mhm.
Got to make sure where you're putting this structure. We got to make sure it's there. COs and all that other stuff. That is a compliance arm. But after a storm, we don't go out. We
Well,
don't make sure everything.
I
So
mean,
that-
no, you don't. But if you got a complaint from a neighbor,
Yeah, we do. We're bound to
Yep.
do that.
and then that would bring you out and say, okay, well, I know we said this was good enough, but clearly it isn't, or you've gone beyond the bounds of what you said you were going to do, and you've stockpiled soil higher than you really should have, and you got to eliminate that.
I mean, even if we require engineered plans, they may not work either.
True, very true, very true.
No, and the DRB is not going to go, all they want is the signature of the engineer on there. They're not even going to look at what it says. Am I right, Keith? The DRB is not, if you get an engineered plan, you don't even care what it says, whether it's going to work or not.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
another
Maybe
cons-
we
Another
don't.
concern with the DRB is that they don't do site visits. I've never come across a DRB that doesn't have that as part of their policy. It
as
says
what?
they may to do site visits on applications, to get the lay of the land, walk the land. I mean, I've never had a DRB that didn't do that.
Yeah, and we don't know what the storms are going to be in the future. I mean, there are
Yep.
so many things that we are not going to be able to control.
Mhm.
So
Then we tighten up these 4 levels. If that's, if it's not doing the job. But we start with
We
these
gotta
4
start somewhere.
levels.
yeah, well, I would
And I mean, this does to a
promote the
degree have
levels
the
concept.
matrix to a degree.
It's what?
The 4 levels sort of constitute matrices. You're talking slopes, you're talking disturbances.
Yeah.
Getting into the weeds of distance from a property line, and then you're subjecting, is it uphill to the property line and down to I can see how that is cumbersome.
Yeah.
Although I love the idea of it at first, I have to concede that it may be too cumbersome to try and do. But some of these ideas where you've sketched out are a decent starting point, and we can,
And they were taken from the matrix, just
right. I sort of got that sense.
levels, because if you have a
But
3-point
similar.
system and you have something that you only get 2 points, you're not going to be captured anyway. So, you might as well just make the 3rd point level the cutoff for the whole.
Wow, I can almost see this beginning to gel.
Yeah, well, we should go because it's time for us to wrap up. But
I would like to
So-
make a motion.
if one
anything less?
one more little thing, if people can think about these specific points, but I'm hoping that we can agree that we're going to have a permitting section. That's the RZR, the section 5, and the subdivision regs. That's the permitting section where we're going to state the requirements. And if they're complicated, like whether to use straw wattles or fencing, then we're going to have to refer them to section 6.17, where we have a few shalls, but mostly shoulds, especially in the, the rain garden part, because you're just not going to be able to make all of those into shalls. So if you want to think about which things are really crucial, like to me, in the erosion section, not having runoff, right?
That's a shall.
key. That should be a shall.
Yeah.
So, we don't want to make the permitting section too long, but the permitting section just says you have to abide by the erosion and sedimentation rules in section 6.17 and make them short and complete requirements that are easy to just go to. So anyway, I'm hoping that we can kind of agree on that as the framework, and we can work out the details at our next meeting, so we can
Yeah. We add some shalls. We bring in the book as a formal reference. We give zoning authority to
the
take it or
zoning
leave it.
administrator.
Yeah, they get take it or leave it authority. This is what they come to him. Keith says that's not good enough. They get upset. Get a professional.
Yeah.
They always have that out.
And hopefully, when we hire new zoning administrators and planning and zoning department people, we will require that they know something about stormwater.
Yes.
Maybe that they've taken the test or whatever. Keith,
Yeah.
you're muted. You're muted, and you probably hope you're muted.
Yeah, you're probably right. The first thing that a zoning administrator needs to have ability to do is write.
Yeah.
Period. You got to know how to write.
You have
Right.
to know how to write, and you also have to know how to read your regulations, because clearly they're not always, the regulations we have are not read. So anyway,
The tough one. Okay, I'm fade.
all right, Mark, you're on with your,
Oh, I'd like to make a motion
very
to
good.
adjourn for the evening.
Okay, any seconds on that?
Second.
Thank you, Chelsea. And Trevor is going to bring us some pretty pictures, and very short and complete, and show people how to do the rain garden or whatever.
Yeah,
Great.
I'd love to see it.
So there will be no disapproving that motion because we're all involved in it. So I think we can adjourn the meeting.
All
Thank
right.
you all.
Have a good night, everyone.
Yes, you too. We'll see you on the 15th,
Sounds like a plan. Wait, 15?
Gee.
the 19th. Sorry, August 19th.
Like, where's my math? All right. Thank you.
Great.
Take care,
Thanks,
folks.
everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye.